Welcome back, everybody. This episode is about taking a bunch of pictures, smacking them together, making one large image out of a bunch of smaller images. You can do this just for panoramics or really anything you want, but I use it a lot for like landscapes and whatnot. This is an example of it. So the whole idea behind it is you basically just take a whole bunch of pictures and you stitch them together in Lightroom to create a larger image, like I said. But whenever you do this, what you pretty much have to do is shoot. Just imagine your scene in a grid like this. So then you would start up at the top left, bottom right, whatever you prefer. And you would say you start top left, so you take a picture here, take a picture here, take a picture here, so forth, and have a little bit overlap in between each one of your frames. And then you do the same thing. You move down to the next section. If you want another section, sometimes you can get away with just 2 or 3 photos, and then that stitches together perfectly fine. But for this, I believe I did 3 rows, and it was about 5 or 6 photos across, using the equivalent of I think it was like a 45 millimeter lens, give or take. So yeah, I went across and did all these photos. And then, just to make it easier, I stitched the top row into one panoramic photo, the center row into one panoramic photo, and the bottom row into one panoramic photo. So then I ended up with 3 photos down here. As you can tell, it's the bottom of the waterfall, this is the center of the waterfall, top of the waterfall. I did this primarily just to make it easier on my computer, so you didn't really run the risk of it locking up Lightroom and crashing and losing all your progress. It's kind of a pain if that happens. It doesn't happen often, but doing these large stitches in smaller segments to like build up to the final image tends to work way better than trying to do it all at once. So, how to stitch your photos together even from the start. You select all the photos you want to stitch. So in this case, I just have these 3. You highlight and select all 3. Right click on them. Go to Photo Merge and click Panorama. Since this is, I think this is about 150, 200 megapixel, it takes a few seconds. But then it gives you these 3 options: spherical, cylindrical, or perspective. It really just gives you a different look for the photo, for the final photo. And you can also uncheck auto crop. It pretty much just like crops in. They remove all these this white dead space around where the photos don't overlap enough to create a part of the image. You can click that, it does it automatically, or you can unclick it. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't make it permanent in the final image. You can always adjust your crop no matter what you want anyways. But another option you could look into, see, you have a little bit of like area here where you could make your photo a little bit bigger if you wanted. If you're chasing like a very large megapixel image, you can click Fill Edges, and the computer will kinda fill the sides of the dead space that was there. I mean, as you can tell, it did not do the greatest of a job. Got this weird jaggies here. That wasn't real. I think it stole this texture from right here. Then on the right side, it like put a floating rock here with some like weird trees and stuff. And then up here, it just like doubled the trees. And then I don't even know what this is. That's kind of crap. So usually I don't do fill edges unless it's something super easy, like blue sky all the way around, like a bird. You want to make the bird print bigger, you could do fill edges and make the sky bigger because it's just blue with some clouds. That's super easy for it to do, but this complex background doesn't work too well. Another thing you can play with is this boundary warp. If you slide this, it'll start to smooth out the edges of the white space down here, and it'll like sort of spread the image wider to take up more of the canvas or the white space. You can try a couple different versions of here for the spherical, cylindrical, and perspective. Personally, I usually go with perspective. It gives the image a feel as if you were standing or seeing through your own eyes, and spherical is, I don't know, it usually flattens it or makes it more of a weird bulbous effect to it, as if you didn't put your lens profile on there yet or not. And that's a side note I would add. Before you go and stitch all your photos together, definitely make sure that you add your lens profile to each photo individually before you stitch. Generally, it gives you a better final image when you're done. And we'll put this back to perspective, and we'll move this boundary warp up a little. Then we can hit auto crop. You can also click auto settings. This will just throw whatever edit it thinks needs to go on to give it like an even exposure. You don't have to do it. I like to do it. Then I can adjust off it. And you can always remove it and go back to your original image anyways. So it doesn't really hurt. So if you're done playing with all these settings, just hit the merge button. And in the top left, it'll show creating panorama. Then whenever it's done, it'll pop up. On the lower end computers, this takes a good chunk of time. This is a Ryzen 3700X. I think it's probably like 4 gigahertz, 4.5 gigahertz. It's 64 gigs of RAM, and it's still taking its sweet old time. Another thing that I enjoy about these large megapixel landscapes is you can really zoom in and get a lot of detail in any of the subjects in them. Although it doesn't want to load while it's creating the new pano. There we go. Now it's spitting out the new panoramic. It's right here. Yeah, this is what it just stitched together in the video here. And it'll load up here real quick. So it is a very large image, so be careful stitching if you have a lower end computer. It's like I make a liar out of me not load anything. And needless to say, this is your panoramic, which is kind of neat about it. Like I said about extra detail and stuff, like you can zoom in and like recrop it, recompose with your crops however you want. Just go back to develop. And this, as you can see, it shows your original white space. If you go to recrop it, even after you clicked the auto crop. So if you wanted, you could just come in here, recompose this. Just create really whatever you want based off this giant canvas that you put together. Oh, there we go. Now it loaded. Yeah, as you can see, that was a pretty heavy crop in on all this for the most part, and you still have plenty of detail and pixels to get a print. You could adjust that if you want. Play with editing a little. So then, if you wanted, you could just, for whatever reason, just include the white space. Let's see here. We'll just do that. We'll just do that as a quick test, and we'll export this. We'll call it Pano Test. Make sure it's not resized anything stupid. And we'll just export that. And we'll put the crop back real quick. So I'll probably use it later on for something. we go. Definitely think it looks better than my previous attempt, actually. This was my previous. Too overblown. This is definitely easier on the eyes. Then here in a second we'll check the export file size. Got my desktop here. Oh, export. As soon as it pops up. Oh, there we go. Just finished. Then here is the exported copy. And here's the details of it. Yeah, it's we'll say 180 megabytes. Click details. Yeah, 22,300 by 14,300. So then you can also just go to, I think there's a website called Megapixel Counter. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, here it is. I can't see it too well. Yeah, I'll put it on the screen. Okay. Let's see, what was that? 22,336 by 14,312. Calculate that size. Yeah, 320 megapixels. So stitching together about, it was probably over 20, we'll say 25, 30 photos. I got a 320 megapixel photo, even though it's got all this dead space crap around it. If you crop it in and re-export, it's probably around 250, 300 megapixel. But obviously that's way plenty for any kind of print you'd ever want to do, like print, canvas, whatnot, plenty of detail. You know, if you want to zoom in almost 1-to-1, it's almost addicting. But you can do this technique with really any camera, just the higher megapixel bodies for like full frame. You're probably gonna get an even larger megapixel size just because your sensor is just bigger. This was shot with a D500, so it's 21 megapixels of frame and it's a crop body. So this is why I kind of learned how to do this and specialize in it, because you don't get the full frame, full lens field of view from a crop body. This kind of makes up for it, I think. But hopefully this was useful for you, and hopefully you check out my other videos, and I'm going to try and keep some others coming along. So good luck out there and happy shooting.